Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at something pretty interesting, I think. It's about the power of self-talk and how it can rewire our brains. And honestly, it might sound a little woo-woo. I get that, but trust me on this one. We'll be going deep into the work of Joe Dispenza, and well, he brings a lot of science to the table, so we're not just floating out there in space.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, what always gets me about Dispenza is that he doesn't just tell you to think positive and everything will be fine, He really digs into the neuroscience behind it all and explains how our thoughts, especially those things we say to ourselves over and over, how those are literally shaping our brains and bodies.
So we're talking actual changes, not just like some feel-good self-help stuff. This is hardcore biology.
Exactly. He's got this statistic that's always stuck with me. It's like we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts every day, something crazy like that. And 90% of those are the same ones from the day before. So if we're always in that same negative loop or telling ourselves we can't do something, it's like we're programming our brains to experience those same things again and again.
Okay, that makes sense. But if our brains are basically on autopilot, how much control do we actually have over changing those thoughts?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. Dispenza says that we can break free of those subconscious loops. We can become aware of what we're saying to ourselves and then choose different thoughts. It's like we're rewiring the brain for a whole new reality.
I've heard of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and adapt, but I never really connected it to something as simple as self-talk. Are you saying just changing our thoughts can change our brains?
That's exactly it. And he backs it up with all this research. There's that principle, neurons that fire together, wire together. So the more you repeat a thought, the stronger that connection becomes, like building a mental muscle.
So if I keep telling myself I'm not good enough, those neurons are firing and wiring together, reinforcing that belief.
Yeah.
But if I swap that out with something like I am capable and worthy, then I'm building new pathways that support a more positive self-image.
Exactly. And those new pathways lead to real changes, in how we act, how we feel, even our overall health.
Wow. Okay. So we're not just talking about feeling a little bit better. This can have a huge impact.
Huge. Absolutely. And one of the coolest things about his work is how he talks about the mind-body connection. Our thoughts aren't just happening up in our heads. They have a direct impact on our physical well-being.
What do you mean? If I'm stressed about work, it'll affect my body?
More than you might think. Our bodies don't actually know the difference between something that's really happening and something we're vividly imagining. So if you're constantly worried about giving a presentation, your body's releasing those same stress hormones as if you were actually up there doing it.
Seriously. Just thinking about something stressful is the same as actually doing it. That's wild.
It is. And those hormones have this domino effect on our bodies. They can mess with our immune system, disrupt sleep, even affect our digestion. So yeah, negative self-talk, it's not just bad for our minds, it's hurting our bodies too.
Okay, wow. I'm rethinking a lot of things right now. So if these negative thoughts are so powerful, how do we start changing them? Is it just willpower?
It's more about becoming aware and making a conscious effort. Dispenza talks about this thing he calls state management. We need to be more in tune with our emotions throughout the day. When we catch ourselves spiraling into negative thinking, we can use tools like deep breathing or affirmations to shift our energy.
So it's not about never having a negative thought again. It's about recognizing it and having a plan to redirect our focus.
Right. And he says it takes practice. Our brains are used to those old pathways. They're comfy, even if they're not doing us any favors. So there's going to be some pushback.
So Dispenza created a 3-day protocol to help rewire those thought patterns, right? I know we don't have time to go into all the details, but can you give us a basic idea of what it's all about?
Sure. The main thing is to intentionally shift our self-talk, getting our thoughts and emotions on the same page. So there's this morning ritual to start the day with positive affirmations, then an afternoon reinforcement where you kind of reconnect with those intentions, and then an evening protocol to reflect on the day and really reinforce that new mindset before sleep.
He even says to add movement into it, right?
Yeah.
Actually embodying those feelings.
Yep, exactly. He believes that when we move, it sends a stronger signal to our brains and bodies that we're serious about this change.
This is all really interesting, but I am curious about the science behind it all. Does Dispenza have proof to back up these claims, or is it more of a philosophy?
Oh, he's got the science for sure. One of the main concepts he talks about is heart-brain coherence.
I've heard that before, but I'm not totally sure what it means. Can you explain it in a way that, even I can understand?
Of course, think of it like your heart and brain are always chatting. You know, when you're stressed or anxious, your heart rate goes all over the place, and that tells your brain something's wrong. But when you're feeling calm and peaceful, your heart rhythm is more balanced, and that sends a signal to your brain that all is good. Heart-brain coherence is basically about getting those two systems to work together in harmony.
So if positive self-talk can create that coherence, it's not just some woo-woo thing. It's actually having a measurable impact on our bodies.
Exactly. And Dispenza's research shows that when people do things to achieve heart-brain coherence, it reduces stress hormones, strengthens their immune system, even improves how their brains work.
That's pretty incredible. But I'm guessing getting to that state of coherence takes a lot of work, especially if our brains are so used to those negative thought patterns.
It does take effort, but Dispenza says the rewards are worth it. He even says that heart-brain coherence can release these chemicals of possibility in our brains.
Chemicals of possibility. What are those?
He's talking about neurochemicals like dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins, those chemicals that make us feel good, motivated, and connected. And here's the really cool part. Dispenza believes those chemicals can actually change how our genes function.
Wait, are you saying our thoughts and emotions can change how our genes work?
That's what his research shows. It's a pretty new area of study, but it's amazing to think we might have more control over our health and well-being than we ever thought possible.
This is blowing my mind. So it's not just about thinking happy thoughts to feel a little better. We're talking about changing things on a cellular level.
That's the power Dispenza thinks we all have. It's recognizing that our thoughts aren't just fleeting things. They can shape our reality in huge ways.
This is a lot to think about. It's making me realize how much power our thoughts really have. But I'm also wondering if this is all true, why aren't more people talking about it? Why isn't this like common knowledge?
Well, it does go against a lot of what people think, you know?
And like we talked about, putting it into practice takes work.
Yeah.
It's not some quick fix.
Exactly. And it means looking inward and taking responsibility for our own thoughts and emotions. And that can be tough for some people.
Okay, I can see that. So let's say we're ready to embrace this whole idea and start taking control of our self-talk. What kind of challenges should we expect? Is it really as simple as just replacing negative thoughts with positive ones?
Well, it's not quite that easy. Dispenza says just saying positive things isn't enough. We have to really feel them, like our thoughts and feelings need to match.
So it's not just about thinking, I am confident. It's about actually feeling confident.
Right, exactly. If we're saying all the right words, but inside we're still full of doubt, we're sending these mixed signals to our brains and bodies.
Yeah, that would be confusing. So how do we get there? How do we start feeling those emotions that we might not be used to?
Dispenza talks about using visualization, like creating these vivid mental images of ourselves, having those qualities we want. If you're trying to be more confident, imagine yourself standing tall, speaking clearly, feeling that self-assurance in your body.
That's acting.
Kind of, yeah. It's about using our imagination to create an experience that feels real to our nervous system.
So if we can convince our brains that we're already confident, even if we don't feel it yet, it'll start to become real.
Exactly. It's about rewiring those pathways by creating new experiences, even if they're just in our minds at first.
Okay, I get it. But it sounds like a lot of mental work. Is there anything we can do to make it easier?
Remember heart-brain coherence. When our heart and brain are in sync, it makes it easier to change.
So if we can get into that state, it'll be easier to reprogram our thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. And one of the easiest ways to do that is through gratitude. Dispenza says it's important to take time each day to appreciate the good things in our lives.
So just focusing on the positive things, the things we're grateful for, can help us shift our energy and be more open to change.
It's about shifting our focus away from what we don't have and towards what we do have. It's about abundance, not scarcity.
Right. It's hard to feel positive when we're always dwelling on what's wrong.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of us are so used to that negative self-talk, we don't even realize we're doing it.
That's why Dispenza says awareness is so important. He says to just observe our thoughts without judging them, just noticing the patterns.
So it's like we become scientists of our own minds, studying our thoughts and figuring out where we want to make changes.
I like that. Yeah. It's about being aware of the stories we tell ourselves and choosing to rewrite those stories in a way that empowers us.
Okay, this is all great in theory, but I'm sure there are people listening who are thinking, I've tried to change my thinking before, and it's hard. Those negative thoughts always come back.
Yeah.
What would Dispenza say to that?
He'd say that's totally normal. Our brains are wired to stick with what's familiar, even if it's not good for us. He calls that resistance the labor pain of a new self emerging.
Interesting. So the discomfort we feel when we're trying to change is actually a good sign.
Exactly. It means we're pushing against those old limits and making space for something new.
But how do we keep going when it's tough? How do we not give up and go back to those old habits?
Dispenza says persistence is key. He says every time we catch ourselves in a negative thought pattern and choose a different one, we're strengthening those new neural pathways.
Like training our brains, like we would train our bodies at the gym.
Perfect analogy. And just like physical training, we're not going to see results right away. It takes time and effort.
So we need to celebrate the small wins, those times when we catch ourselves and make a different choice.
Absolutely. Every time we interrupt that negative self-talk and shift our focus, we're taking a step towards creating a new reality.
You know, one of the things that really stood out to me about Dispenza's work is how he talks about our energy impacting the world around us. He even mentions creating positive ripples in the quantum field.
Yeah, that's one of the more out there concepts he talks about. Basically, he's saying we're all connected through this field of energy and our thoughts and emotions can influence it.
Okay. That's a little bit much for me, but I'm open to it.
Yeah.
So you're saying that if I'm putting out positive energy, it can actually affect the people around me.
That's what Dispenza says. He thinks when we change our internal state, it creates this ripple effect that goes outwards, influencing our relationships, our communities, even the world.
So it's not just about personal transformation. It's about creating a more positive world.
Exactly. It's realizing that we're all part of something bigger and our choices can make a difference.
That's pretty inspiring. But I have to admit, it's also a lot to wrap my head around. It's almost like we're talking about superpowers.
It can feel that way. But Dispenza says these abilities are inside all of us. It's about tapping into our potential and using it to create the life we want.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dispenza's work, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners? What's the one thing you hope they'll remember?
I think the most important thing is to realize that we have more power than we think to shape our own lives. Our thoughts aren't just things that happen, they're forces that are creating our reality.
And by being aware of our self-talk and choosing our thoughts carefully, we can literally rewire our brains and create new possibilities.
Exactly. It's about realizing that we're not victims of our circumstances. We're creators of our own destinies.
That's powerful, and I think something we all need to hear. So as you go about your day, pay attention to the conversations you're having with yourself. What are the stories you're telling yourself? Are they helping you or holding you back?
And if you find yourself stuck in that negative loop, remember the things we've talked about today: gratitude, visualization, heart-brain coherence.
And most importantly, be patient with yourself. Change takes time and effort.
It's a journey, not a destination. And every step we take towards being more aware and in control of ourselves, that's a win worth celebrating.
This has been so eye-opening. I feel like Dispenza's work really makes us rethink how we see our thoughts and how powerful they are. It's a little scary, to be honest, but also really exciting.
It is exciting because it means we're not stuck with what we've got or our genes. We can actually create the life we want.
So to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge. What's one area of your life where you'd like to see things get better? Maybe it's your health, relationships, career, or just how you feel overall.
Pick that one area, and for the next week, really pay attention to how you talk to yourself about it. What are the thoughts and beliefs you have? Are they helping you or holding you back?
And then start using those tools we've talked about. Try replacing negative thoughts with positive affirmations. Picture yourself reaching your goals. Practice gratitude.
And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress every time you catch yourself falling back into old habits and you make a choice to change your thinking. You're rewiring your brain and getting closer to that life you want.
We've just scratched the surface of Dispenza's work today. But the main thing, I think, is that we have the power to change our lives by changing our minds.
It all starts with that conversation you have with yourself. So choose your words carefully because they can shape your destiny.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring and keep expanding your possibilities.